Welcome all to the Lofi Podcast. Today, my guest is James, otherwise known as Spective. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, man, it's lovely to hear your voice. We've been talking a little bit over Discord, organizing this episode, and I'm quite excited to get into some of these questions. So, thank you so much for being willing to come along on this little interview.
No, it's my pleasure.
Yeah, so here, just to get started, could you tell us a little bit of who Spective is outside of Lo-Fi? So who's James? Like, do you have any hobbies or interesting facts about yourself?
So hobbies are kind of sort of things you might expect, like video games, board games, games in general, stuff like that, you know, going out for like big walks and, you know, traveling around the world, that kind of stuff. And obviously music, not just making it, but, you know, listening to it and, you know, being involved in it as much as I can, really.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's a good mix. You've got games, walks, and music. So, I used to be quite a bit of a gamer myself. What kind of stuff do you like?
It's kind of like quite random in a way. I mean, these days it's definitely leaning more towards like more kind of chilled out, or kind of not like this is the kind of super cozy games, but more like cozy-er games, or like, you know, detective kind of ones, or platform, like I guess more like 3D platformers. But I feel like the older I get, the less patience and tolerance for stress I have, because it's usually what I do like at the end of the work day, and I want to, you know, kind of wind down. And just like getting my ass handed to me like again and again is not as enjoyable as when I was younger. And you know, and then you kind of got the thrill of trying to, you know, beat a level or whatever. It just, I don't know. The older I get, the more I just like, no, I just want to chill out.
Yeah, no, I perfectly understand. The last platformer I played was Cuphead. And it wasn't a good choice, because I'm not the most patient. And anyone who's played that game before will know that, there's a lot of retries and you die a lot in it. So, so here, getting back on track with music, as it is the Lo-Fi Podcast. So could you tell us a little bit about your background in music, and like how you got into music and how your musical journey started? Was this from like a younger age, or were you a bit older?
From a younger age, I mean, I've always liked music. I've got memories of, you know, having my parents' vinyl records on when I was like playing with Duplo and stuff, like Lego and that kind of stuff, up to like getting my first like record in Woolworths or whatever. So this is going back a little bit, I've always had an interest in music. I started learning the piano when I was quite young, and then I kind of got a bit bored in terms of the, you know, having to learn the same pieces, and ended up switching to drums, and had a couple of lessons, you know, took a little break, and then basically I was making such a noise, like tingling and tapping around the house, that my parents were like, right, you need a drum kit. So, you know, I just then picked that up and kind of taught myself how to play that. I got involved in bands, you know, at school, and then at university as well. And while I was I think it was about the third year of uni, I started making, it was actually a little bit before that, but, you know, that's when I was started to go more serious, making like electronic music, you know, using DAWs and that kind of thing. Whereas before it had all been, you know, in bands or me writing stuff on guitar and drums and that kind of stuff. I kind of moved into that, and it started off being like instrumental hip hop, but it didn't really have as much kind of the connections, and the you know, in that at that time there wasn't that. This is kind of the pre the lo-fi explosion, you know, so there wasn't. It was a bit harder unless you were in like, you know, communities, or you knew MCs and that kind of stuff, which I didn't really. But where I was, there was a lot of there was a scene for like drum and bass. So I ended up kind of going into that and getting really into that. So, you know, I did that for about 6 years. And, you know, some people, I still get people, even now, like, even though I haven't released any drum and bass for about 10 years, I still get people like listening to some of that stuff, not on the same level of the other stuff, but people still really connect with that, and it's really quite humbling that, you know, stuff I did quite a while ago still has an impact on people. But that's kind of where it all started. And if going on, I ended up just kind of getting a little bit burnt out with it, and I had sort of professional exams and stuff going on in my job that I kind of basically stepped away from music production for almost a year. And then basically right as I'd finished these exams, I was back making music again. But because I'd been listening to so much like lo-fi, jazz hop, you know, I was quite early on checking out Jazz Hop Cafe and, you know, Lo-Fi Girl and Chill Hop, all those ones on YouTube, and really kind of getting into that because of having the background of you know, liking instrumental hip hop. You know, a couple of years earlier, getting into stuff then as well, a lot of that kind of resonated with me, and I just wanted to kind of make my own stuff, and I had sort of played around with it, you know, quite a few years ago, so it kind of felt quite natural to me to do that, and certainly, you know, the experience of chopping up breaks and stuff like that with drum and bass is quite helpful as well. So just kind of went from there, and I basically sat on stuff for probably about 2 years. I was just making stuff and not releasing it because I didn't really quite know where or what to do with it. And I didn't know if I wanted to kind of get back into that kind of pressure of feeling you need to put stuff out and having labels not come back to you, or labels not act the way that you would want them to, that I kind of didn't. And then I ended up thinking, you know what, I do actually want to do this. I do want to take the push, which is what I did. And I just put some self-release, some things out. And in the course of just doing bits and bobs of promo, I kind of came into contact with Jazz Hop Cafe, who were, you know, very local to where I was. They were in the same city as me at that exact time, but it was lockdown, so I couldn't actually hang out with them. But then, you know, from there they kind of supported some of my stuff, and then later in the year invited me to be on one of their compilations. And, you know, from there it was just the process of, you know, making music and, you know, reaching out to other labels, you know, like Chill Select and other ones like that were, you know, quite supportive to me early on. And and then just sort of collaborating with people and you know, networking and building up contacts from there, really.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear about your background with drums as well. Because like with lo-fi hip hop being quite a percussion heavy genre, I'm sure that helped a lot in your production. And then with drum and bass as well, it kind of you can see the journey and how it led to where you are today. So like, because whenever I'm thinking about myself and how I started getting into production, the drums was the one instrument that I never learned how to play. And it's the one instrument that my mum barred me from ever having, just because of noise pollution in the house.
Yeah.
And so like, it's interesting because whenever I'm starting then with more of a melodic background, and I don't know, did the drums in some way change your perspective in the way that you made your music rather than having it more melody based? Or maybe I'm just making an assumption here.
No, I think that's fair point to say. I think even when I was writing stuff on the guitar and making or on guitar and the piano is kind of what I was doing. This is quite a while ago. I was still kind of thinking about, well, what are the drums going to do? And even when I was recording those, I would, you always record the drums first. So you're kind of, when you're playing those drums and you're putting fills in, or you're, going to halftime, or you're doing, having a breakdown, all that sort of stuff, you're always thinking about, well, what are the drums doing? And then you're putting the guitars on and the piano. So all of it's being molded by the drums. And nowadays I do kind of tend to focus on the kind of chords or the melodies first and then do the drums. But I then still do all of the structure and all of that stuff is usually after I've worked out the drums, if that makes sense. So they're still kind of, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Because last year I have a friend and his main instrument is the drums. And so we were actually both in the car together driving, and he had put on some music that he enjoys listening to. And so it was very percussion heavy. And like, I never really thought about the drums as an instrument properly until he sort of introduced me to this more, don't remember the specific name of the genre of music, because like, I mean, there's so many subgenres within metal, but it's a type of metal. So unfortunately I'm not a metalhead, so I can't say the specific subgenre. But listening to it, like, you can hear how the drums, it's not just a compliment, it's actually sometimes can mold the entire track. So I can understand what you're saying there and how it's so true. So yeah, I mean, so you've got into lo-fi, you've got some drums and so on, and so you talked about labels, but you also have a label of your own, Chill Ride. And so how did that come to be?
So it's been, running a label has been the sort of thing I've been interested in since, you know, quite a long time. I used to, when I was a teenager, I used to, you know, giving away my age a little bit, I used to make like, what do you call them? Like mixtape CDs of like albums I'd been listening to or things I downloaded. And I'd always have it under the name of this like fictional record label, just basically making these playlists. So I always had an interest even since then. And then I started, you know, curating playlists and stuff quite soon after I got into releasing lo-fi. And then, you know, I still kind of had it in my mind. I talked about it with, you know, one or two people about maybe setting one up, but it didn't really kind of go anywhere because I didn't really have enough of a foothold in it. So basically the minute I felt like I have enough here to you know, give back to artists who would want to sign to a label, I felt like, you know what, this is something I've got to do. And my wife was, you know, very encouraging of saying like, you know, just do it. And if it doesn't really work out, you know, you've had a go at it, rather than just, you know, procrastinating or just not doing it, you know. And I think it is quite important to, you know, take the leap with those things sometimes. And, you know, the risk wasn't too massive, that I felt like it was gonna, you know, the worst thing is that you just stop doing it and maybe you lose a bit of money, but, you know, life is for doing the things you want to do, right? So yeah, and it's been about 2.5 years now, and it's still going, so it's all good.
Like, would I be right in saying that although you made music, kind of the label was something that was in the back of your mind the whole time?
Yeah. I mean, not like initially, because I think I needed to kind of feel like I was, you know, more involved in the scene. But I think it was something I was wanting to build towards for sure. And I just was waiting. I was sort of biding my time with it for probably about 2 years or maybe before actually launching it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it always takes that time to build it up until you're ready to actually launch something like a label. Yeah. So then, like, as an artist and also a label owner, like, how does working from both ends kind of feel for you? Have you learned something more about the industry, or what has changed in your view of the whole lo-fi scene then?
That's a good question. I think it's definitely you have a appreciation for the effort that you hear when you hear people's music, or occasionally like maybe the lack of, but or the use of AI. But a lot of the time, it always is this sort of thing that you can hear what people are doing and what they're putting into it, and if it's something that you feel it doesn't fit, or it's not quite the right vibe, it's always really awkward or quite an unpleasant feeling to be like, I'm not gonna do this, because as an artist you can understand, you know what it's like to be on the other side of getting those, you know, rejections or whatever. So it's tricky, and I think just having that appreciation for what people are doing and what people are doing differently as well. And I think that's one of the things I've wanted to do with the label. I don't know if I've necessarily succeeded, because of if you have certain playlists, you kind of get a little bit typecast into wanting to have things within that ballpark. But I've been wanting to try and be a bit more open to having different sounds within the genre, and I feel like we've been able to do that to a degree. So
that's interesting, like, because you were talking there just about different sounds within the genre, and actually that leads straight into the next question I've written here, because I know like some labels have specific genres that they like, But like, Chill Ride, you're a little bit more varied. And so like, what do you exactly seek then? Is it more music that resonates with you, or how do you decide what you want to release?
I mean, I think probably the word that, or the words that kind of summarize it best, and they're kind of, I'd say, loose interpretation, would be things that are, kind of cozy or kind of just very kind of mellow or kind of vibes really. But that's sort of open to interpretation. And a lot of it is probably also down to just my taste, because or other people in the team sometimes are involved in that as well, but it's probably down to that. But like I said, I try to have a mix of styles. So we've had stuff that's more kind of folk hoppy more recently as well. We've had stuff that's a bit more kind of like a kind of classic or like old school kind of vibe. We've had sleepy stuff, so we've had a kind of and jazzy stuff. So there's been quite a mix within that. But as long as it doesn't go too hard or too sleepy, it's sort of there is some kind of I can't think of the word now, latitude. And I don't want it to sound, I don't want every track to be the same. I don't want it all to be very fixed in one sort of style, because I think, I don't know, I like a bit of variety. And I think it's just quite nice to have that a little bit of variety,
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, because I find of late that the whole genre of lo-fi has started to expand quite a bit, and that there's more subgenres appearing. And so, like, I know I've released a couple of folk hop tunes with you. And
yes.
Yeah. And so it's very difficult to actually find labels who are willing to release folk hop. And so like the fact that you're willing to have such a wide variety of tracks, in your catalog is a great encouragement, especially for us, like on the artist end. So like genuinely, thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, literally we hadn't really had that much in that style until I think we had certainly maybe had one or two tracks, but then we had a spring compilation last year, and there quite a lot of them were in that. So I just like, okay, let's go with this then. It's the tracks are good, so let's do it. Let's not reject these just because we have a very fixed notion of what spring is. And a lot of them sounded, they were fitting the theme. So why not?
Yeah, I know, that's fantastic. And so, yeah, it's definitely such an encouragement, even for like artists who are starting out as well, and they find the subgenre really fun to make music with, and that's what resonates with them, but it's hard to find a label. So
yeah, and I know that from being an artist as well, that it can be difficult when you feel like you're being kind of very much sort of pigeonholed to make it in a very specific way, and that can sometimes feel like it's going against what you would like to do creatively.
Yeah, absolutely. And so like then one of the questions actually I was having is like, as a label, you're not always open for submissions. And so like there's some artists who are wanting to submit all the time, and then like what's the reason behind having these windows? I know we discussed this very briefly over Discord, but like, yeah, like what's the reason behind having these and maybe compilations and so on?
So it's mostly to do with workload. I'd like to be able to listen to lots of submissions all the time, but it's just not feasible. And because I'm the one making those sorts of decisions on it, it's just a lot to do, and there's a lot of admin that goes on behind the scenes, and it's just a lot easier for me to make those decisions and kind of move things forward, but without having to be checking submissions all the time. And that's why we'll often open for compilations, and that those will be sort of the windows where there's then it's sort of kind of put in the calendar the time to actually go through and listen. And we've been getting a lot of submissions through the last several rounds, that if we were getting just submission, we at one point, I think before we started doing that, we'd be getting submissions almost every day, and when certainly I have a full-time job. I also, want to make music as well. It's just it's a lot to be doing all of that, and also, doing all the administration and artwork and all that other stuff that, the promo and all the other stuff with existing releases as well. So that's why it's just more like a tactical move based on resource.
Yeah, no, I can perfectly understand, because I mean, like, we all have the same number of hours each day, every one of us is 24 hours, and so there's only so much we can do. So we're talking about submissions now. Like, there's been a big issue recently with AI music being submitted to labels. Have you actually had much of that yourself in terms of submissions? And how do you think, as a lo-fi community in a whole, we should move forward with this?
So, yes. I won't go into specifics, but certainly suspected strongly. We've had that, and that's another reason why, moving into these submission cycles and having disclaimers and things put up on forms is to try and filter that out, because we were starting to see more of that AI submissions creep in, and that's not something that we're interested in. And I know that we've got other friends in the scene as well who are like-minded, in the sense that it's not anything we want to be involved in, for kind of ethical or kind of creative reasons, or even just from a kind of a legal standpoint, because it's just still very blurry in terms of the legalities of it, that we just don't want to touch it, basically, for multiple reasons. Does that quite answer your question? I don't know, I've kind of gone off on one a little bit there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do understand. Because I remember whenever sort of generative AI first came out, and it was all the thing, that I would use it for my album art. But sort of as time went on, my conscience wouldn't let me. It's hard to explain, but I think as someone who makes music and makes an art form, it seems slightly, what's the word? I'm trying to think. English is failing me now, but it seems somewhat disingenuous to be using this, because there are people out there who are putting time and effort into creating beautiful pieces of art. And so why would you go out there and use something that's just made by a machine whenever you could support someone else? And so I think it's also the aspect of where we can be supporting each other, people who make art in other forms, whether it be visual, whether it be music, whether it be films now too, with AI, like there's Sora and all exists. And so it's very difficult to find a clear line on how much AI we should allow people to use, but I think that's something that we're going to learn with time. I'm not sure what you think.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll put my hands up. We when we started the label, we were using AI art. It was, coming in it was kind of quite a novel thing. And same as you, we stepped away from it completely, because it just didn't feel right, and it didn't feel like something we wanted to be doing with the artwork. And certainly when we had a strong stance against AI music, it felt like, well, if we're going to be, saying we're not going to take any AI music, why would we continue to use AI artwork? And had the fortune to be working with a producer called Leaves, who's been doing a lot of kind of graphic design work for the label behind the scenes, and kind of helping me improve my own graphic design skills as well. And that's really enabled us to kind of step away from that completely. And still we have our old releases that have it on, unfortunately, but I don't know if we'll be able to go back and update all of those at this point. But and there's still a lot of labels in the scene, one's bigger than ours, that use it. And every now and again I might be like, oh, can we not use this on this one? But I kind of get from the point of view that a lot of labels don't have the budget or the resources to be getting commissioned art. So I get it on that hand, and with my own music, I'll kind of go, okay, well, if the label and collaborator or whatever are happy to go with it, we'll just go with it. I'm not going to make a big deal out of it, but increasingly, I think it's becoming quite a murky thing, and certainly seeing the way it's going just in the world, I don't really like the direction of it. So, for the label, we haven't used it for, over a year now. And yeah, I don't want to in the future, in any way really. So that's kind of, where we stand on it. And certainly with music, which is what I was talking about earlier, where we'd had, suspected AI music submissions, that's, we don't want that at all. So it just makes sense to kind of have have the same approach across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think, I'm thinking about the lo-fi community, and it's almost as if everybody is, it's like a large family. I know it's odd putting it that way, but everybody, when we're collaborating, we're working, we're making music together, it's real music. And so then you have people trying to come in with AI made music and trying to sort of infiltrate, if that's the right word, into labels just to make a quick pound.
Yeah.
And so how as someone who's listening to these label submissions, I know you say they're suspected AI, but what kind of gives it away that it is AI produced?
So I think I kind of basically I had went on and logged on to Suno basically and just ran a bunch of stuff just to be like, what does this sound like? Because I wanted to know, because I was like, okay, this is something that's growing, and it I need to know I need to know what it is, and just from running a few things like that, you kind of I developed a bit of an ear for it, and just hearing the kind of artifacts and just the way that the melodies are composed, and other kind of giveaways in terms of the sonic qualities of it, that I can kind of get a sense for it, for what it is. That's why I won't say it's 100%. I'll just say suspected, because I don't know for certain, but you get a pretty good idea. And there are more tools and things coming out all the time that you can use to check, and they'll have other methods of checking it other than just your own ears that will say, oh, this is XYZ% suspected AI or human involvement. And I'm sure that there might be ways of they have false positives and things like that on them, but so you do need to still have an understanding yourself, and that's probably where it helps being a producer, that you still would have to rely on your own judgment a lot, but I do think that there is a certain sound to it that kind of gives it away. And certainly if there's if you're getting sent an album of 20 tracks, you're like, okay, there's no way you're going that all in on the label, or if that's a lot of time, that just is just suspicious. So
yeah, no, because I've been reminded, there's I can't remember what label it was, but they've gone to the extent now that whenever I was in the submission form, that they said to be prepared to show your raw DAW files in order to prove that that this is an actual human-made track. And so it is an issue in the music scene at the moment, but I suppose, as with everything, in time we'll sort it out and see how things go. So we were just talking there then about AI and lo-fi. And so then, how do you think the genre is going to go now into the future with this sort of nemesis to music, or so to put it? And how can we develop this into something that's original and still human-made?
So I think, I've heard back quite a few of the episodes of the podcast, and I think I've found it interesting hearing you say about how you think that lo-fi is kind of expanding into different areas. And I think I would agree for sure. And I think that's a good thing. I think that it's a lot more interesting to hear, where it can go and what other genres or ideas and styles can be fused with, with lo-fi. I think that makes it more interesting, and I think that helps it kind of grow and kind of stay dynamic and not just be this fixed thing that has to be a certain way, and that's it. I think that's how we keep it alive. And also, thinking about AI, I think that's one of the things that being a human is that we have access to creativity, like our own thoughts and ideas and what we want to do, in a way that machine learning is based on historical data, inputs, and that's one of the coming up with new ideas and thinking about how you could fuse different styles and genres and in very particular ways. I think is something that having we have the edge on the technology in that way. We can try and do things that have not been done before, whereas AI is always working on what has been done before. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a very interesting outlook on things. I never thought about it that way, that AI is working on what has already existed. It's only taking what people have made and just twisting it into its own version of whatever that may be. And so as people, we have that creative ability to make something new from scratch. And so that's, as you say, it's a way that we can beat the AI, trying making new subgenres, mixing different styles together. And, it mightn't work first try, but we just keep on going. And it's a perseverance that sort of makes a great product in the end.
And I think if it doesn't work, you learn something. So there's always something to be gained in terms of the creative process. That is also, I think people will look at, you try something and it doesn't work as a negative. But I think it's a positive because you can always learn something from that. And if you're just, putting in prompts, maybe you're learning how to do better prompts, but you're not learning about the creative process in the same way. And you're not developing skills, in terms of your actual, making music, with your hands, with the keyboard, with pads, with samplers or anything, in that sense. And I think that, I'm sure that some people might argue that the future is going to be that, but I think that's not why people like making music, why it resonates with people. So I think, we've just got to kind of bring the humanity, into music to that's what we can do.
Yeah, like it's almost as if the artist, when he makes his piece, he almost like breathes life into it as well, because it's almost a part of that person who made it. It's all of your experiences, everything that's happened to you up until that point, your skills, your friendships, everything goes into this piece of art. And so it has a story behind it. It has a life behind it, whereas AI doesn't have any of that. So that's really good. So maybe before we wrap up then, well, one word of wisdom that we can take is don't use AI, but do you have any other words of wisdom for artists that are starting out, just getting into their craft, and how they could improve it?
I think, just kind of being quite open to, hearing what other people's opinions might be, or trying things, and if they don't work, you learn something, and also I've learned a lot from just YouTube and stuff. There's just so many resources you can find online, if you want to dial in a specific skill, and I think it is always useful to learn skills, even if it's a very niche plugin or a very specific thing, because you can then go back and next time you do it, you'll just do it automatically, and over time those skills kind of compound, and suddenly you've got a track that you're really happy with the mix on, or the processing or whatever. So I think just being quite open is probably one of the best things you can do, rather than having a very fixed idea of what you want something to be, and or not being able to take criticism, because I mean certainly a lot of the time labels or even your friends or people in the community they're not looking to hurt you or anything like that. A lot of it is meant well, not always, but a lot of it is usually meant quite well. We want to believe that at least people are acting with good intentions. So I think being quite open to not taking it as a personal rejection, And that, something I've struggled with as well. If someone doesn't like a track or a label rejects it or whatever, and you think it's a rejection on your skills, your ability, or on you. And a lot of time it's not that at all. It's just that it wasn't the right thing that they were looking for, or it didn't fit their exact idea that they want, or there's all kinds of things going on. And the person listening to it might have been having a bad day. It might have just been extra cranky. There's all you don't know what's going on, and I think you've just got to kind of be quite open and go, right, okay, let's try a different label, or maybe I'll release it myself, and just be quite open to it rather than I have to do it this way. It has to be on this label. It has to be this particular thing. I think you've just got to kind of go with the flow. That's kind of increasingly what my philosophy has been anyway.
Yeah, it's a very good outlook. Any setbacks or anything that doesn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, it can always be a learning experience. And I think that's one of the great things. If we change the mindset and the way that we look at things, there's so much that we can learn from. So yeah, that's really great. So thank you for sharing that. So
you're welcome.
Yeah. So, well, James, thank you so much for this interview. It was great to talk. It was great to hear about your history behind music, and especially like the wisdom that you've gained over the years as well is fantastic, especially for artists who are just starting out and have just got into music. There's so much they can learn from what you shared. So thank you so much once again. And well, yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your evening, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah, you too, man. It's great to have a chat.
Yeah, thank you. Here, all the best.
All right. Yeah, you too.